Okay, so the pituitary gland located at the base of the brain, secretes a whole bunch of hormones, including two that we've mentioned previously back on page D5, growth hormone and oxytocin. So again, if you've forgotten what those do, what they are, go back to page D5. And in addition, the pituitary gland secretes two what are called gonadotropic hormones. Now, what are gonadotropic? What does that mean? Well, the word tropic means to affect. That's what tropic means, to affect. And what these two hormones affect are the gonads. What are gonads? Reproductive organs. So there are two hormones secreted by the pituitary gland that control the reproductive organs in both men and women. And as we'll be learning, the name of the reproductive organ in guys are the testes. That's not new. We learned that back in section D when we talked about testosterone. The name of the reproductive organ in the females are the ovaries. Again, we learned that back on page around D3. So the pituitary gland secretes two hormones that affect the reproductive organs. They control them. What are the names of these two? Follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. FSH and LH. Now, they're actually named based on what they do in women, but both FSH and LH control the reproductive organs in both men as well as women. They affect the testes and they affect the ovaries. Let's tell you first what FSH and LH does in the male. What does it do to a guy? These two, this hormone from the pituitary gland. In a guy, follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, causes his testes to make sperm. So this is very interesting, because literally the testes will not produce sperm unless stimulated to produce sperm by this pituitary hormone. This hormone released from the pituitary gland into the bloodstream. So if that pituitary gland doesn't release FSH, the guy's testes will not produce sperm. What does LH do in a guy? Luteinizing hormone, or LH, from the pituitary gland causes the testes of a guy to secrete testosterone, the male sex hormone. So again, literally, the testes will not secrete testosterone, the male sex hormone, unless stimulated to by this pituitary hormone called LH. All right, so literally FSH and LH are controlling the production of sperm and the secretion of testosterone by a guy's testes, or testicles. Now, what does FSH and LH do in the female? Well, we're going to see that women are much more complicated than guys. All right, they always are. All right? FSH causes the growth of an ovarian follicle in a woman's ovaries. Now, of course, we're immediately wondering, what is an ovarian follicle? And I will explain what an ovarian follicle is. For the moment, you can think of it as an egg. So FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, causes the growth, and that's why it's called follicle-stimulating hormone. It stimulates the growth of an ovarian follicle, and it causes the follicle cells, whatever those are, to secrete estrogen. All right? So this is a little bit more complicated than in a guy. All right, now, what does this second pituitary hormone, luteinizing hormone, do in the female? Luteinizing hormone in females causes, you'd say, it does what? It causes ovulation. It causes the egg to pop out of the ovary. That's called ovulation. We'll see pictures of all this stuff in just a bit. And LH causes the follicle cells in something called the corpus luteum to secrete progesterone. Now, just to assure everybody, whether you're a male or female, if you're a female, and I've described what FSH and LH does in a guy, trust me, guys didn't know what FSH did before I told them in their testes. And if you're a guy, since I've just said what FSH and LH does in a woman, women did not have any idea what any of this means. That's what I was saying, that most people have no clue as to how the reproductive system works. All right, now, let's, one more thing here. The next term, and I'm going to explain what all this means yet. What is the difference between the words puberty and adolescence? It is common for people to use these two terms interchangeably, but they're actually different. Puberty refers to that period of time where you become able to reproduce. You become sexually mature, able to reproduce. So the age of puberty is about age 11 in females and about age 12 in guys. That's when it begins, approximately. So beginning around 11 in females, sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later, the body of a girl starts to change, and within a year or so, she'll be able to reproduce. In guys, it occurs around age 12, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later, 13, where a boy changes into a male, a man, and he's able to reproduce. All right, now that's puberty. What is adolescence? Adolescence is emotional maturity. So if puberty is sexual maturity, adolescence is emotional maturity. This takes, unfortunately, many more years, because a 12 or 13-year-old girl or boy may be able to reproduce, but they are not emotionally mature. Is that fair to say? Now, I would say that in terms of adolescence, so adolescence is when the individual becomes more emotionally together. I would say that for most females, that by the time they're about 18, 20, they're starting to get there as far as emotional maturity. Okay? It varies, obviously, in the person. It varies even more than sexual maturity. But by the time most women are 20 years old, they're kind of getting serious about life, kind of. Guys, it takes a lot longer. There may be guys who are in their 40s who are still going through adolescence. In other words, they are really still clueless as to what the world is about and how this works. So, so both sexual maturity and emotional maturity occur sooner in females than in males. But the real big difference is emotional maturity. So that's why 20-year-old women are looking for guys, and guys are like skateboarding and belching when they're in their 20s. All right, so it's just really don't understand what the world is about and what life is about. Okay, now we're going to focus first on guys, which are easier, and then we'll deal with females. So we're going to talk first about the external genitalia. That's what we mean by that is the external plumbing, what you see on the outside. And then we'll deal with the internal genitalia, what's on the inside. Now on the outside, what you see on the outside of a guy is a penis, and right below the penis, a scrotum, which are the sacs that contain the testes or testicles. Now we indicated that as far as the penis goes, there's an opening at the end of the penis. That is called the opening of the urethral canal or urethra. And what comes out that opening of the urethral canal, that opening at the end of the penis, is either urine or sperm. Now it's either one or the other, or neither, but it can't be both urine and sperm at the same time. But the penis and the urethral canal within the penis serves both the reproductive system and the urinary system, both. Now, the penis, when a boy is born, there is a fold of skin called the foreskin. And the foreskin, we're going to see a picture of this in a moment, is commonly removed in this country. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. And when they do remove it, that procedure is called a circumcision. And that's the removal of the foreskin. The scrotum, we said, are the sacs below the penis containing the testes or testicles. Let's take a look at, and I wrote it down, page L6, so we can see a picture of what this looks like. So, first of all, on the very top of page L6, on the top of page L6, we began this story by mentioning the pituitary gland. And that's located at the base of the brain And that pituitary gland is what secretes two hormones, two gonadotropic hormones, two hormones that affect the reproductive organs in both males and females, called FSH and LH. And we'll have more to say about them. Now, right below that, it shows the external plumbing on a guy. So we can see the penis and we can see the sacs or scrotum. Inside the scrotum or scrotal sacs are the testes or testicles. Now, looking at the penis, so there's the opening at the end, and that opening is called the urethral orifice, the opening of the urethra or urethral canal. And as we've said, what comes out that opening is either urine or sperm, but it can't be both at the same time. Now, the head of the penis is technically called the glans, and then here you can see this fold of skin called the foreskin. Now, traditionally, the foreskin is removed as a religious rite among individuals who practice Judaism or Islam. So they both do circumcision as a religious ritual. And then they have a party, which basically, what you're struck by is that some people will find any excuse for a party. You know, even removing a foreskin sounds like a good reason to have a party. It is common, though, irrespective of religious ritual, for most Americans, usually they will have the foreskin removed. If it's not done as a religious rite, as we said in Judaism or Islam, then it's done by a pediatrician in the office. The main reason why it's done is most adult males, American males, are circumcised. So when they have a son, they usually want the son to look like them, as opposed to not. Is there any technical reason why it should be removed or not be removed? No. Again, the original reason why it was done was a religious rite. And that goes back, in the case of Judaism, over 4,000 years. So, yeah.
Is that just to not look like God or something like that?
No, it has nothing to do with that. It was simply a way of basically, I don't want to get into all the ethical aspects of this, but it was basically saying you should control yourself. That's really what it was. It's a mark or a sign that this can cause a lot of problems in life. It's like a gun, and you should know how to use it. All right? That's really what it is. In taking a very complex, theological question, it is literally a mark on the body to remind one of to being serious in terms of how one uses that part of the body. So, now, right below it is the shaft of the penis. So next time you're getting the shaft, you know what you're getting. Now, right here on the right, this should increase my hits on this. All right, now, on the picture on the right, this shows erection, penile erection. Now, the way that the penis becomes erect is it's a lot like filling a balloon with water. If you fill a balloon with water, it makes it stiff, right? And so what's happening here in the penis is it's not that it's filling up with water, it's filling up with blood. And this is called vasocongestion. The vessels, vaso means blood vessels, become congested with blood. Blood flows into the penis, causing it to become stiff and erect and upright. Now, incidentally, some people who have problems with erection, which is called erectile dysfunction, so ED, so that's why they take Viagra. Viagra has to do with increasing blood flow into the penis. The erection of the penis has nothing to do with muscles. So if a guy says, I got a lot of muscles down there, don't be impressed. Don't be impressed, because erection has nothing to do with muscles, it has to do with blood flow. All right, now, we said that the testes are located in the scrotal sacs below, and it's cooler temperature in the scrotal sacs than the rest of the body. And it appears that in order to produce sperm, which is one of the things that the testes do, it can only occur normally if the testes are in the scrotal sacs where it's a little bit cooler temperature. Okay, let's go back to page, I'm going to come back to L6 in just a moment, but just before we do, back on L1, the first page of this, so we've talked about the penis, we've talked about the opening of the urethral canal, the foreskin, what a circumcision is. Question?
Yes. So when the penis gets erected, sometimes do the testes like?
Yeah, they can change position.
Oh.
Yeah. We talked about vasocongestion, where we wrote that the blood vessels, technically the veins within the penis, become engorged with blood. Now let's talk about the internal plumbing of a guy. So we're going to talk about the testes, and I'll just mention right here, the testes or testicles have two main functions. What are the two principal functions? A, spermatogenesis. What does that mean? That means the generation, the production of sperm. And what actually causes sperm to be produced by the testes? That hormone called FSH from the pituitary gland. I said that at the top of the page. We said that without FSH, the testes won't make sperm. It requires that it be stimulated by FSH. Don't worry about how long it takes for sperm to develop. I will not ask you that question. The second function of the testes, letter B, is that the testes secrete the male sex hormone testosterone into the bloodstream. And of course, testosterone, as we learned way back on page D3, is the masculinizing hormone. And I would encourage you to go back to page D3 and review what we said testosterone does, among other things. It increases both anabolic and catabolic reactions, it increases hair growth, and it stimulates or increases libido, or sex drive. All of that was back on page D3. You'd say, is that the kind of question you'd ask on a final? Yeah, you know what? I kind of think by the time you finish a college biology class, you should know what testosterone or estrogen do. I mean, those are like pretty fundamental hormones in the body. So, yeah. Now, remember that what causes the testes to secrete testosterone is LH, released from the pituitary gland. And we wrote testosterone causes masculinization. Now, before I go any further in terms of reading what's here, let's again return to page L6. So back on page L6, we're now looking at the lower picture on L6. And just to get your attention, you'll notice I wrote no for the final, this picture, because this picture will appear on the final exam. The one that says no for the final. All right, now, let's look at this picture. So, at the very bottom, we have a testis. You'd say, what's that? The singular when we refer to one testis or two testes. That's classic Latin. It goes from I-S to E-S. When you study Latin, that's when it works. So, that's one testis or two testes. You'll notice that in this testis on your right side, it's a cutaway view, revealing that on the inside of the testes are these so-called seminiferous tubules. The seminiferous tubules are where the sperm are produced. So the sperm, or the production of sperm, which is called spermatogenesis, forms inside these seminiferous tubules of the testes. Again, I want to remind you, what causes this production of sperm in the seminiferous tubules of the testes is this hormone released from the pituitary gland at the base of the brain called FSH. That's what's causing this to happen. So that master endocrine gland is controlling the reproductive organs. Now, you'll notice that right here on your left, right above the testis, is something called the epididymis. If you're a female in the class and you're thinking, guys know this, it's not fair, none of the guys knew what an epididymis was until I just mentioned it. Okay, what is it? The epididymis, and here on the right, is where sperm are stored. So sperm are formed, they are produced in the seminiferous tubules, and they are stored in the epididymis. Now, the sperm only live a few months, and then they die. So any sperm that a guy doesn't ejaculate are just going to die in the epididymis. You'd say, well, then what happens? Just the cells basically die and they deteriorate. This is not unique to sperm dying in our body. We constantly make new red blood cells and white blood cells in our bone marrow because our red blood cells and white blood cells only live so long and then they die. And so when cells die, they deteriorate, the chemicals are reabsorbed by the body, and we're constantly making new cells. We make new skin cells all the time, we make new red blood cells, new white blood cells, we make lots of cells in our body. So this is not unique to sperm, but the sperm are being produced all the time normally. They're stored in the epididymis, and after a few months they die. So they only live so long. Now, you'll notice that attached on your left side, attached to the epididymis is a muscular tube called the vas deferens or ductus deferens. This is a muscular tube. Now, I wrote here on your left, I wrote this, so you may want to write it, during sexual arousal in a guy. So when a guy gets sexually aroused, sperm are going to start to be pushed up this vas deferens, just as I've shown by the arrows. And so this muscular tube is going to push sperm from the epididymis where they're stored up, and let's see where it goes. The sperm are pushed right into this area right here. This area right here, this structure is called the prostate gland. That's called the prostate gland. And the sperm are pushed right into, and they collect in a cavity, in a chamber within that prostate gland called the ejaculatory duct. So the ejaculatory duct is where these sperm collect inside the prostate gland during sexual arousal. All right, now, right above the prostate gland are a pair of glands called seminal vesicles. Right? These are the pair of seminal vesicles. That word is written right here. All right? So there's a pair of them, right and left. Now, why are they called seminal vesicles? What do? They secrete a fluid called semen. And I wrote that word semen right above seminal vesicle. What is semen? It is a fluid containing sugars, among other things. And this semen, this fluid containing sugars, is then secreted also into this ejaculatory duct of the prostate gland. So during sexual arousal, two things accumulate or collect in the prostate gland: sperm and semen. Now, why do we need semen? Because sperm are living cells, and all living cells need sugar or they die, right? They carry on cellular respiration. They are living cells. For as long as they live, they need food nourishment. It's not like they're not unique from any other cell. If without any sugar or nourishment, they die. All right, so that's the purpose of the semen, among other things. So, again, during sexual arousal, two things are flowing into the prostate. Sperm, where do they come from? The epididymis. They're being pushed up, and semen is being secreted into the ejaculatory of the prostate gland as well. Now, I might just mention, and we'll see this written in a moment, that as the prostate fills up with sperm and semen, as it fills up, a guy feels a sensation of fullness. And that sensation that he feels, he will know he's getting closer and closer to ejaculating or having an orgasm. The common expression is a coming sensation. He's, he feels like, gonna come. Okay, so I'm only saying this so that people can connect with what they know their body does and what's happening in terms of biology. So that's the sensation. Now, again, guys who have experienced this weren't, until I told you this, weren't saying, oh, my prostate is filling up with sperm and semen right now. But that's what's creating that sensation of fullness from the prostate. Now, there's another pair of glands right below the prostate known as Cowper's glands. And I wrote that Cowper's glands secrete an alkaline, sticky fluid. It is a sticky fluid that is alkaline in pH. That's the opposite of being acidic. And these Cowper's glands secrete this sticky fluid into the urethral canal. This is that canal that runs through the penis. And this sticky alkaline fluid is secreted into the urethral canal, and at the beginning of sexual arousal, at the very beginning, is when this fluid is secreted, and some of this sticky fluid will appear at the end of the penis. Now, what's the purpose of this? The purpose of this sticky alkaline fluid is we have learned that not only does sperm and semen come out the urethral canal, but so does urine, right? And urine tends to be acidic. And the acidity of urine would tend to kill sperm. So if a guy is just urinated, there might be a little bit of urine residing in the urethral canal that would tend to harm the sperm. So it's believed that this sticky alkaline fluid neutralizes any acidic urine that might still be in that urethral canal. And that's believed why it's secreted right at the very beginning, even before the sperm and semen are ejaculated out the urethral canal. That appears at the very beginning.
Is the Cowper's gland the same as the bulbourethral?
Yes, they're also called bulbourethral.
So it's the same thing.
We'll see. It's the same thing, and it's written in your outline. All right, so in summarizing then, the very first thing that happens in sexual arousal is the Cowper's glands secrete this sticky fluid, that some of it appears at the end of the penis. And then, as sexual arousal progresses and intensifies, we've said that sperm and semen will start to fill up the prostate gland. At the time of the orgasm, the ejaculatory duct of the prostate will contract rhythmically. And as it contracts, it will cause spurting of the sperm and semen out the urethral canal of the penis. Right? That's called ejaculation that occurs during the orgasm. Now, one more thing I want to mention. You'll notice that on your left side, it shows the vas deferens cut. And when they cut the vas deferens, that's called a vasectomy. Now, the purpose of it, it's pretty obvious if you think about it. If you were to have the doctor cut the vas deferens on both sides, there would be no way for the sperm to get up to the prostate. So sperm could not be ejaculated out the penis. So the purpose of a vasectomy procedure is to prevent sperm from coming out the penis, and therefore it can't cause pregnancy. So it's used as a sterilization procedure so that you don't cause pregnancy. A question that's commonly asked is, well, if you did have a vasectomy done, which can be done in a doctor's office, a urologist's office, so under local anesthetic. So if you had it done, would anything still be ejaculated out the penis?
Yes.
The answer is yes. Semen. The semen or seminal fluid still comes out. There's just no sperm mixed with it. And the only way somebody would know whether there's sperm mixed with the semen or not is if they carry a microscope with them and take a sample. Yes?
So would your testes drop or something?
No. This doesn't show all the detailed anatomy. But trust me, people who study anatomy, everything is much more complicated than a couple of balls here and a penis. And so there's all kinds of internal structures and so on. So there's a lot more in your body than just a few. When we look at the female reproductive system, if we looked at that picture, you'd say, well, it looks like just kind of a uterus and some ovaries hanging there from some. No, it's all connected by a lot of structures. All right, let's go back to page L1 and summarize what we've said. So on L1, we're talking about on page L1 the internal structures, the internal genitalia. We've already learned what the testes do. The testes carry out two functions. They produce sperm in the seminiferous tubules of the testes. And remember, what causes the production of sperm is FSH from the pituitary gland. Without it, the testes won't make sperm. The second function of the testes is to secrete testosterone into the bloodstream. I want to emphasize this point. Testosterone is a hormone, and like all hormones, as we learned on the bottom of D3, hormones are secreted into the bloodstream. Testosterone doesn't come out of penis. Okay? Sperm and semen come out of penis, but not testosterone. That's a hormone circulating in the bloodstream, secreted in the bloodstream. And of course, what causes the testes to produce and secrete testosterone into the bloodstream is that pituitary hormone called LH. The function of testosterone, as we learned originally back on page D3, is masculinization. But you can go and re-examine D3 to look at the details. What is the epididymis? It's a coiled up tube where sperm are temporarily stored. Again, sperm only lives so long. What is the vas deferens or ductus deferens? It is a muscular tube that pushes sperm up to the prostate gland during sexual arousal. What's a vasectomy? A vasectomy is when you cut the vas deferens to prevent sperm from coming out the penis. This is called a sterilization procedure. What are the seminal vesicles? They secrete this fluid called semen, containing sugars into the prostate gland to keep those sperm alive. On page L2, what is the prostate gland? The prostate gland is located just beneath the urinary bladder of a guy, because we know that both sperm and semen and urine pass through it. And the prostate gland is what ejaculates. It's what contracts and ejaculates the sperm with the semen during an orgasm. Now, the prostate gland is one of the more common places where cancer can occur in guys. So that's called prostate cancer. So it is one of the more common places where it can happen. The urethral canal or urethra is that tube that passes through the penis. And what comes out the urethral canal is either urine or sperm, as we said. And Cowper's glands, also called bulbourethral glands, secrete a clear, sticky, alkaline fluid into the urethral canal during the very beginning of sexual arousal. And again, we think that the purpose of it is to neutralize any acidic urine that might be residing in the urethral canal. Now, the next term is coitus. Coitus is the clinical term, the scientific word for sexual intercourse. You know, the word that you might use, an F word. The clinical word is coitus. So I want you to try to learn some of the, more sophisticated words, so we have a little bit more sophisticated vocabulary than what many of us are used to. Now, let me talk about sexual intercourse in both males and females. In both, and I wrote both here on the side, in both females and males, both, during sexual arousal, there is a general increase in muscle tension throughout the body. So all the muscles in the body actually get more and more tense during sexual arousal. Now, in males, number 2, as the level of sexual excitement or arousal approaches its peak, sperm and seminal fluid are emitted. Emitted means released into the ejaculatory duct of the prostate gland. This creates this so-called imminent coming sensation. All right, so the prostate filling up with sperm and semen. That, of course, is uniquely in guys, number 2. But in both, number 3, in both males and females both, the orgasm is associated with involuntary rhythmic contractions of the muscles throughout the body. So there's a buildup of tension in the muscles during sexual arousal, and at the time of the orgasm in both males and females, there is a convulsing, these involuntary muscular contractions throughout the body. And finally, the muscles stop convulsing or contracting, and we wrote that the orgasm then in both males and females, so I'll add the word both there, in both males and females, the orgasm is followed by an overall decrease in muscle tension and a state of profound relaxation. So the muscles tense up, then they contract rhythmically during the orgasm in both males and females, and now after that, the muscles throughout the entire body are very relaxed, and that's what largely creates the good feeling is this reduction in tension, muscle tension throughout the body. Now, diseases and disorders of the male reproductive system. So what is the difference between the words impotence and infertility or sterility? Impotence is an inability to attain or maintain an erection. So if a guy has ED, erectile dysfunction, difficulty in attaining or maintaining an erection, that's why they take Viagra. That increases blood flow into the penis. Infertility or sterility is caused by a low sperm count. Now, I'm not asking you to know what's considered a low sperm count, but it is kind of amazing. Any guy who has a lower sperm count than fewer than 20 million sperm per milliliter of ejaculate is effectively sterile. You'd say, well, if it's less than 20 million is sterile, then what's normal? 120 million. So when a guy ejaculates, there's about 120 million sperm per milliliter. Wow. So now what's kind of amazing also is why, if there's like 19 million per milliliter, which is effectively sterile then, how come it only takes one sperm to unite with an egg? Why does a guy have to have 19, more than 20 million to still be able to father a child or cause a pregnancy? If it's less than 20 million, 19.5 million probably won't work. And that's because when the sperm are released into a woman's body, most of them get lost and never find the egg. And of course, we know they won't ask for directions. Right? Right? So, that's a classic joke, husband and wife, the guy's driving and they're lost, and the wife says, why don't you ask somebody, where do you have to find? Nah, it's okay, I know, I'll find it. All right? Then it gets more lost. All right? So the sperm, anyhow, most of the sperm, when they're released into a woman's body, never find the egg. So you got to have more than 20 million per milliliter to increase the probability that some of the sperm aren't going to get lost. All right. Now, sexually transmitted diseases. So these are, that's abbreviated STDs. The older name was venereal disease. Why it was called venereal is after the Roman goddess of love, Venus, because these are sexually transmitted or involve lovemaking. So that's how they got the old VD, venereal disease term. Now, all of these sexually transmitted diseases tend to cause sores around the genital area. In a guy, that would be the penis. Now, these sexually transmitted diseases can also be in women as well. So when we talk about diseases, these are both in males and females, both. And they are accompanied by these sores in the genital area in both males and females. Now, the most common sexually transmitted diseases include gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia, and genital herpes and HIV. Now, the difference is gonorrhea and syphilis and chlamydia are bacterial infections. Those are caused by bacteria that can be transmitted from one person to another. They cause sores. The good news is we've learned about antibiotics. And antibiotics can be used to kill bacteria. Bacteria are living cells. And we had learned, you needed to know this for the most recent test, are enzyme inhibitors. We covered that in F3. So they inhibit bacterial enzymes. Right? The sulfa drugs were the very first antibiotics, and penicillin, all of them inhibit a bacterial enzyme. We talked about that in F3. You'd say, would you ask something like that on the final? I think you should know how an antibiotic works. I think that's basic biology. I don't think that's an esoteric question. There's certain basic facts that we should know when we complete our college education, where a college-educated person should know some basic information here. Genital herpes and HIV are caused by viruses. And so the bad news about that is we know viruses are not living things. They're not in any of the 5 kingdoms of living things. And you should know what the 5 kingdoms are of life in the form of a multiple choice question. That's basic. There's only 5 kingdoms. So you should know that. I'll cover that at the end of section B. After talking about evolution, we talk about the 5 kingdoms of life. So, but viruses are not a living thing. We will have more to say about viruses before the course is over. So you can't kill something that's not alive. So therefore antibiotics, and the word antibiotic literally means against life, bio, don't work against viruses. So if you've got genital herpes, they don't give you penicillin. They don't really give you anything, because there's nothing that really works. While they do have some medications like Zovirax or acyclovir or something like that, it really doesn't knock it out. So you'll still see sores that appear periodically in the genital area. And the good news about genital herpes, it's not fatal, it's not anything overly serious, but we don't have any cure. HIV can also be transmitted sexually. It causes what's called AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. I will have more to say about that before the end of the course. That one is ultimately fatal. So that's a very serious viral infection. And again, we don't really have a cure for these viral diseases. Okay, I have been talking about guys. So I'm going to leave, could I say more? Yeah, but all right, so you know a lot more than you did as far as the male reproductive system. So now let's take a look at females. Now, so we're still in L2. Now, well, again, we'll start with the external stuff, what you see on the outside, and then we'll look at the internal. Now, what you see on the outside, in the genital area of the female, that external genital area is called the vulva. So whether one knew that term or not, you do now. It's called the vulva. Now, associated with the vulva, or genital area of the female, is a structure called the clitoris. The clitoris, we wrote, is homologous with the penis. You'd say, what does that mean? It's actually corresponds to the penis of a guy. It's much, much smaller, much smaller, and nothing comes out the clitoris. It's not like, you know, sperm and semen come out the penis. Nothing comes out the clitoris, but the clitoris does become erect during sexual arousal, just as the penis does. So it becomes engorged with blood. It's much smaller and erect during sexual arousal, just as the penis does. These are homologous structures, which means they have the same embryonic origin. What becomes in a boy baby, what becomes the penis, in a girl baby becomes the clitoris. So they're homologous. The word homologous is like analogous, similar, corresponding. Now, there's also two openings in the vulva area of the female. There is a urethral canal and a vaginal canal. There's an opening of the urethral canal, and what comes out that is urine. And there's a separate opening called the vaginal opening, or the opening of the vaginal canal, or vagina. That's for reproduction. So you'll notice that in contrast to a guy, in a guy there was just one tube, one opening, and what comes out that one tube of the penis is both urine and sperm. Not at the same time, but it serves both functions. But in females, there's two separate openings. One for urine, urethral canal, and one for reproductive function. So in terms of the vaginal canal, I always think of this, the vaginal canal, as basically kind of things go in and things go out. What can go into the vaginal canal is a penis. And when a penis goes into the vaginal canal, that's called copulation. There's another word, you know, instead of the F word, copulation, sexual intercourse, coitus. And, but if no precautions are taken, 9 months later, a baby comes out that very same opening that the penis went in. And it's a lot easier to get a penis in than to get a baby out. A lot easier. All right, now, in the vaginal canal, is there a question? Just yell it out if there's a question. Otherwise, there's not always one. No? Okay. In the vaginal canal, there are Bartholin's glands, and Bartholin's glands are what cause wetness during sexual arousal. So during sexual arousal in a female, it gets wet in the inside of her vaginal canal. That's called lubrication. And so the Bartholin's gland lubricate the vaginal canal during sexual arousal. In many ways, this is somewhat similar to the Cowper's glands secreting that sticky fluid at the very beginning of sexual arousal. in a guy. We'll talk about an episiotomy in a moment. Let's mention a hymen. The hymen is a membrane that covers the opening of the vaginal canal in a girl. So there is actually, the opening of the vaginal canal is kind of covered or partially covered by a membrane in a girl, and either the first sexual intercourse breaks that hymen, or sometimes it breaks on its own just from physical activity, just from on its own. But certainly one of the things that might cause a breaking of that hymen membrane is with the first sexual intercourse. And there's a little bit of bleeding and a little bit of pain when the hymen membrane is broken. We also mentioned there are two folds of skin, the labia minora and labia majora. And the labia majora corresponds to the scrotum of a guy. Well, to help us understand this, let's look at page L7. Right? And I wrote that, CL7. Now let's look at L7. Now, on the bottom picture, we'll look at the top picture in just a moment. So this is, again, a somewhat graphic picture of the vulva area of the female. That's the external genital area. And so right here, this whole area is called the vulva. And this little structure right there is called the clitoris. And the clitoris, we said, corresponds to the penis of a guy. It's much smaller. Nothing comes out nothing comes out. The opening, there is no opening of the clitoris. But it does become erect during sexual arousal. Attached to the clitoris, attached to it are two folds of skin. These folds of skin are called the labia minora, which means literally minor lips. Okay, the minor lips or minor folds of skin. And right between these two folds of skin called the labia minora are two openings. Two openings. The upper opening is the urethral orifice. That's the opening for urine to come out. The lower opening is the vaginal orifice. That's for reproductive function, the vaginal orifice. So there's two separate openings, one for urine and one for reproductive function. So the penis goes into the vaginal orifice, and what can come out the vaginal orifice 9 months later is a baby. Now, there is, we said, a membrane that partially covers over this opening in girls. That membrane is called the hymen. So the hymen membrane kind of covers that opening because presumably a 7-year-old girl isn't having any intercourse then. But again, that membrane can break on its own. Now, another thing that we're going to mention here, it's in our notes, is that with the birth of the first baby, the first time a woman gives birth, I said that it's a lot easier to get a penis in than a baby out, because the head of a baby is a lot bigger than the penis. Is with the birth of the first baby, the OB/GYN, the obstetrician who delivers the baby, actually makes a vertical incision about a ½ inch down through the vaginal orifice to make it wider. They actually make a cut. Now, this is a very sensitive area, so the thought of any female in the class hearing about this would be, my gosh, that must be really, really painful to cut and widen that vaginal opening to make it easier for the baby to come out, because they would prefer to cut it and stitch it rather than have it be torn from the birth of the baby's head. In fact, the woman doesn't even know it's happening. And you'd say, how could she not know when they're cutting this very sensitive area right there? And the answer is they cut it when the head of the baby is crowning. So the head of the baby is right there stretching the opening, and usually at that point, the woman who's giving birth at that moment says very, very calmly to her obstetrician, excuse me, "Get the baby out!" That's usually what they do. Because they feel like they're going to explode. And so all they want is the baby out. And so they don't even feel anything because the baby's head is stretching that whole opening a lot. So they actually cut it and they stitch it, and it only needs to be done with the birth of the first baby, because after that the opening is larger. After that,
I have a question. When you give birth, I've heard sometimes women poop.
yes, there's all kinds of things that happen, and you know, it's very common. I usually rarely ever express my opinion. I'll express my opinion. This is just my opinion. I have 5 children, my wife and I. I was there for the birth of all 5. 2 of them were C-sections. I was there. But I'm a physiologist by training. All right? So, and I know all this stuff. I knew it before I even got married. So, for me, it wasn't such a big deal. Most guys really do not want to be present when a woman is giving birth. So it's very common and popular today in American society, not in all other cultures or societies, where the wife wants their husband to be there. Most guys, the majority, there's always exceptions, the majority do not want to be there. And there's embarrassing things that happen, and it's probably better if they're not. All right? And then they can see the baby, after the baby's cleaned up and the wife has given birth and everything is nice, then it's probably a lot better. And they don't have to see all the details of how this happens. All right? Now, if your husband's a medical doctor, a physiologist, or just somebody who's very interested in this, that's one thing. But usually, what we're covering right now, for most people, is more information than they want. Okay? This may be more information than many women want. It's just that you understand how important this is. Yes?
Does the episiotomy happen on the bulbar sponges or the perineal?
It's a cut right here in this area between the vaginal orifice and the anus. It's about a ½ inch cut down in the perineal area. That's where it's done. It's called an episiotomy. So now, before we cover anything more with the female, though, we did promise sex, so let's look at the top picture. And our first thought in the top picture on L7 is, what are we looking at? So let me help you get your orientation. This is the missionary position, all right? This is the guy. This is the female. Here is his penis. Can you see his penis? And his penis is inserted into the vaginal canal of the female. And if you look carefully, you can see the sperm coming out through the urethral canal of the penis, and the sperm are deposited right here at the top of the vaginal canal. That's what it says. This shows sperm are in the vagina. So can everybody make that out? That's the penis, and the sperm are being ejaculated or released. Now these sperm are then going to swim up the uterus. This is the uterus right here. They're going to swim up the uterus into the fallopian tubes. We'll see a better picture of this in a moment. And where fertilization occurs, if it's going to occur, where the egg and the sperm unite is in the fallopian tubes. That's where it occurs, not in the uterus. Not in the uterus, contrary to what most people think. Now, the description of all of this, of how the sperm get out of a guy's body and where they go in a woman's body, is written right here in this paragraph. And I would encourage you to read it. But I made a note to see page L10. So let's look at page L10. So on page L10, here's a summary. It's like a flow chart of how the sperm got out of a guy's body and where they go in a woman's body. So it begins here on the top left on L10. The sperm, of course, are produced in the testes. They are stored in the epididymis. The sperm are pushed up the vas deferens to the prostate gland during sexual arousal. And then the sperm are ejaculated out the urethral canal of the penis. So now these sperm are ejaculated, and during intercourse, they're released into the vaginal canal of the female, right? The top of her vagina. These sperm swim up the uterus, up to the fallopian tubes. And that's where, if there's an egg in the fallopian tube at the time this is occurring, then you've got pregnancy. You got conception, fertilization. All right, does everybody follow that? So you should know, how sperm get out of a guy's body and where they're going in a woman's body. Yes?
When a man has prostate cancer,
They remove the prostate.
and so then he.
That's it. It's over.
And then.
May as well kill himself.
Oh my God.
But there's no more sexual activity.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They don't get any erection?
Right. No, because the nerves are cut when they remove that part of the body that control that. So, but usually the good news about prostate cancer is that it's primarily, when it occurs, primarily in guys who are, later in life.
So
All right?
when you
And most cancers in women involving ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, these are actually far more serious than prostate cancer in a guy. All right, now, let's just look at L9 for a moment. And on L9, this is, we've looked at this picture before. This is not the first time we've seen it. Some of you may even have notes on this. In the context that we had looked at this a long time ago, is we were learning that on the inside of the fallopian tube are ciliated cells that push the egg through the fallopian tube, because the egg cannot move on its own. And we had explained what a tubal pregnancy was, if anybody remembers. But anyhow, here it just shows, this is the egg here, and it shows a sperm uniting with the egg. That's called fertilization. And so then the ciliated cells on the inside lining of the fallopian tube will push this developing embryo through the fallopian tube, and then it will implant in the inner wall of the uterus. All right, and so eventually then you've got something like this inside the uterus. All right, let's go back to our lecture outline on L2, see where we're at. On L2, so on page L2, so on page L2, we've talked about the vulva, we've mentioned the clitoris, the urethral canal, the urine comes out of, the vaginal or birth canal. We've mentioned Bartholin's glands. We've mentioned what an episiotomy is. An episiotomy is when they widen the vaginal opening during childbirth. Usually that's only needed for the birth of the first baby. One of the more common types of infections that can occur in the vaginal canal of women are called yeast infections. A yeast is a type of fungus. And so it's a fungal infection. But the good news is a fungus is a living thing, just like bacteria are living things, and there are antifungal antibiotics, like monostat, that is used. The hymen we've mentioned is that membrane that covers or partially covers the vaginal opening in a girl. And we've mentioned the labia minora and labia majora. The labia majora corresponds to the scrotum or scrotal sacs of a guy. And again, if you're trying to visualize this on our picture on L7, the labia majora are these outer folds here, and that corresponds to the scrotum of the guy. So what becomes the scrotum in a guy becomes the labia majora in a girl. So these are called homologous structures. On page L3, so now let's look at the internal genitalia, and I'm just going to begin this and we'll call it a day. Next time we'll finish off the reproductive system. On L3, so we mentioned what's on the inside, of course, are ovaries and the fallopian tubes and the uterus. And the two functions of the ovaries, just like the two functions of the testes, is oogenesis. It's like spermatogenesis. It involves the production of ovarian follicles. And what causes this ovarian follicle to grow is called FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone from the pituitary gland. What is an ovarian follicle? This, I've drawn a picture. We'll see next time a better picture. But this is a picture of an ovarian follicle. This is actually what develops in the ovaries of a woman. that is an egg, an ovum, surrounded by what are called follicle cells that actually secrete the hormones. And the last thing that we'll say for today is that the ovaries not only produce these ovarian follicles, which we'll explain next time on Monday, but the ovaries secrete estrogen and progesterone into the bloodstream. Those are the female sex hormones that we originally learned about back on page D3.